Wealthy millionaire and mistress celebrate together, but pregnant wife walks in and exposes them. Thunder rumbled across a velvet black sky the evening Anthony Astor, revered billionaire and high society magnate, threw a flamboyant gala at the Regent Grand Hotel. The rooftop venue dazzled with fairy lights, champagne flutes gleaming under flickering lanterns, and a string quartet playing a haunting melody that wove itself through the mingling crowd. Whispers about Anthony's brilliance and legendary empire skittered around like excited sparks. Yet behind those polite smiles, a curious tension charged the air, as if even the night itself sensed that beneath the facade of elegance, something dark and shocking simmered. Near the rooftop's ornate balustrade stood Anthony's mistress, Gabriella Moretti, a statuesque woman known for her runway model looks and magnetic allure. She moved through the throng in a dress that shimmered with every step. Her mere presence caused some to gape and others to avert their eyes, unsure whether to be impressed or appalled. With her chin lifted and a glass of expensive champagne in hand, Gabriella looked like a queen surveying a realm she already considered hers. By her side, Anthony wore a tailored suit that projected confidence, but those who knew him best noticed the tightness at the corners of his eyes. Their intimate closeness at a public event sparked murmurs. Why flaunt such proximity, especially with the cameras poised and hungry? But the cameras had a bigger story yet to capture. Janine Astor, Anthony's pregnant wife, was about to appear uninvited, unannounced, and unyielding. Though seldom underestimated as a fashion designer of rising prominence, Janine had been sidelined lately both by the media's obsessive focus on her husband's rumored affair and by her own heartbreak at the growing emotional distance in her marriage. She had no illusions about her husband's betrayal. Her entire being felt weighed down by suspicion, sleepless nights, and the exhaustion of carrying a child. After months of quiet dread, the time had come to end the charade. Janine's meticulously planned entrance involved a single phone call to an old friend at the hotel, ensuring her name appeared last minute on the guest list. She showed up wearing a form-fitting red gown that accentuated her blossoming baby bump without apology. That subtle choice alone sent a message. She was neither weak nor oblivious to the headlines swirling around her. It took only moments for the paparazzi to notice her. A ripple went through the gathering onlookers, startled to see the woman whose absence had been so widely discussed finally emerge in the heart of her husband's grand event. Anthony, locked in conversation with Gabriella near the terrace's edge, caught sight of Janine the instant she stepped onto the marble floor. His expression froze between shock and a flicker of something akin to guilt. Gabriella glanced back, her carefully painted lips twitching in a mixture of annoyance and nervous delight. For a heartbeat, the entire rooftop seemed to suspend itself in silence. The string quartet's melody wavered, and the clinking of glasses felt unnaturally loud. Janine approached, the scarlet train of her gown trailing over the tiles with regal calm. Every heartbeat hammered a declaration of betrayal in her chest. Everything she had suspected, every rumor, photograph, and late-night phone call led to this confrontation. She no longer needed to guess or question. Her husband stood exposed in the form of his smug mistress, clinging possessively to his arm. And tonight, it was Janine's turn to seize control of the narrative. "Enjoying your night?" she asked, voice cool but trembling beneath her composure. Gabriella's sneer melted into an unreadable mask. Anthony tried to open his mouth, likely to stammer an excuse, but words eluded him. The onlookers, transfixed, edged closer, anticipating a scene. Janine, however, was no trembling damsel. She'd come prepared, armed with more than raw emotion. The small envelope in her clutch contained photographs, call logs, and enough evidence to shred Anthony's public persona. She intended to drop that bomb right here if necessary. But more powerful than the evidence was her righteous indignation at having been sidelined, deceived, and pitied by a public that assumed her powerless. A hush blanketed the rooftop as Janine's gaze flicked from Anthony to Gabriella. "Let me guess," she said, voice sharper this time. "This is strictly business, right?" Neither responded. Gabriella's arms tensed around Anthony's. Cameras flashed, capturing every taut second, every flicker of pain on Janine's face. The city lights stretched in the background, forming a surreal stage on which this drama unfolded before society's most influential figures. Nobody interrupted. Nobody dared to. By the end of the night, the truth would be out. About Anthony's affair, about Gabriella's hidden aspirations, and about Janine's unyielding will to protect both her dignity and her unborn child. No false grin or multi-million-dollar donation could overshadow the magnitude of this confrontation. Thunder rumbled again, an ominous reminder that storms rarely show mercy. And Janine, forging her own path through heartbreak, was poised to unleash one that would shake the Astor empire to its core. Janine's journey into the Astor world began like a dream spun from gilded threads. She was a prodigious fashion designer with a small but promising label, forging connections in Milan's competitive scene. Anthony Astor strode into her pop-up boutique one sunny afternoon, and with a single glance at her meticulously hand-sewn gowns, he offered to buy a piece for an acquaintance. Back then, she believed this to be her lucky break, a sign that her craft had finally caught the eye of someone who could elevate her career beyond her modest beginnings. She never guessed Anthony would return months later, this time at a glitzy charity event in Paris, where mutual acquaintances placed them at the same table. Over the course of the evening, the conversation flowed from haute couture to global economics with ease. Janine found Anthony's mixture of business acumen and inquisitiveness about the arts disarming. He, in turn, seemed intrigued by a woman who wasn't dazzled by wealth alone. Their courtship escalated in a series of whirlwind dates, moonlit walks along the Seine, weekend getaways on a private yacht in the Mediterranean, stolen moments in Manhattan's hidden jazz bars. Proposals in the Astor realm were never subtle, and Anthony's was no exception. He arranged a private event by Lake Como, Janine's favorite place in Italy, where a small orchestra played her favorite classical pieces. There, he got down on one knee and slipped onto her finger a platinum ring set with an emerald and tiny diamonds. Cameras flashed as the Astor press machine spun it into a fairy tale engagement. Janine believed the foundation of their relationship was genuine love, woven through respect and shared dreams. If only that innocence had lasted longer. As Anthony's business expanded, so did his travels, meetings, and seemingly endless responsibilities. The first year of marriage still felt blissful enough: lavish dinner parties, philanthropic galas, occasional romantic surprises. Yet Janine noticed subtle transformations, whispered phone calls he'd hush the moment she entered a room, an intensity in his gaze that reflected burdens. He wouldn't share, staff members tiptoeing with anxious faces when she asked about his whereabouts. When she announced her pregnancy, she hoped it might anchor them in the wonder of building a family. Instead, it highlighted a chasm. While she yearned to nest, to design a tranquil nursery, and to enjoy the radiant glow of motherhood, Anthony seemed perpetually preoccupied. Late nights at the office turned into weekend flights to Europe. Rumors about a certain Gabriella Moretti circulated among the mansion's staff. Rumors Janine tried hard to ignore, then eventually confronted with trembling determination. Anthony, a practiced hand at deflection, maintained it was all business. His skillful lies unraveled the day a friend texted Janine a photograph from a gossip blog. Anthony leaving a luxury hotel in Monaco with Gabriella at his side, their body language unmistakably intimate. Janine's heart constricted, the sense of betrayal festered and multiplied. Still, she tried to reason with him. "Is there something you want to tell me?" she asked gently that night, her voice catching. Anthony responded with the same pattern, a forced laugh, a subdued apology for any misunderstanding, and a statement about strategic alliances. Janine pressed on, sensing half-truths. She felt that if she saw him face to face, truly saw him, she would know. But Anthony offered only carefully measured words and guarded glances. And so began her period of sleepless nights and moral quandaries. Should she remain the dutiful wife while her husband's betrayal grew more brazen? Or should she stand up for herself, even if it meant a public spectacle? The final straw came when she discovered explicit text messages on his phone, hastily hidden, but not quickly enough. Her confrontation that night ended in shouted accusations and tearful denials. Realizing that direct pleas changed nothing, Janine chose a different tactic. She would attend the next Astor Foundation event, no matter who tried to keep her away, and reveal the affair to everyone who had placed Anthony on a pedestal of respectability. If her life was going to burn, she intended to spark the match on her own terms. The gala's official guest list was curated to perfection, merging the Astor Foundation's philanthropic donors with the upper echelons of international finance and entertainment. That Janine's name was conspicuously absent from the first version circulated by Anthony's office told her all she needed to know. The public was to believe the billionaire's wife was merely out of town or too unwell to attend. In truth, her presence threatened the delicate facade Anthony had constructed with Gabriella at his side. Janine, far from deterred, leveraged her remaining connections. A discreet phone call to an event coordinator, an old friend who owed her a favor, secured her name on the official roster. Through that single maneuver, she gained access to the heart of Anthony's charade. On the night of the gala, she arrived cloaked in confidence. Her red gown, carefully chosen to highlight her 6-month pregnancy, served as her silent statement, "I am here, pregnant with your heir, and I refuse to be discarded." She entered through a side passageway to avoid any attempts by security to delay her. When she emerged in the gilded hallway leading to the rooftop, a hush enveloped the staffers who recognized her silhouette. By the time she stepped onto the terrace, journalists and photographers had already pivoted their cameras to capture her every move. Her gaze swept across the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos, eventually locking onto Anthony. He stood near the terrace's edge, an arm draped protectively around Gabriella, their posture too comfortable to be business. Gabriella, regal in her midnight blue ensemble, caught Janine's eye with a flicker of haughty acknowledgement. In that moment, Janine's pulse raced with a cocktail of pain and resolve. There was no turning back. She advanced into their circle, hardly noticing the stares. Anthony's face paled. His lips parted, but words did not form. The guests around them retreated slightly, as if anticipating an explosion. Gabriella, however, did not flinch. "Janine," she said smoothly, offering a nod as if greeting a distant acquaintance. Janine felt the gall rise in her throat. She forced composure. "I seem to have stumbled upon a cozy gathering," she remarked, letting her eyes linger on their interlaced fingers. Anthony tried to pull away from Gabriella, but her grip tightened, refusing to be hidden like a shameful secret. "You shouldn't be here," Anthony murmured, stepping forward. "Let's talk inside, away from the crowd." Janine shook her head, voice carrying a steely edge. "I won't be shamed into a corner. You brought her here, publicly. You have no right to conceal me." A hush descended. Even the whispered gossip faded, overshadowed by the tension radiating from the trio. Gabriella brushed her hair behind her ear, a sign of her composed vanity. She exhaled, as though bored by the theatrics. "It's a fundraiser for children's hospitals," she said. "I'd appreciate it if we could keep our personal matters from overshadowing the cause." The audacity of Gabriella's remark set Janine's heart pounding. She withdrew an envelope from her clutch. Inside were photographs and phone transcripts she'd painstakingly collected. Some were vague, others damning. Anthony pressed chest to chest with Gabriella outside an Italian villa, a late-night text exchange about missing each other, time stamped during Janine's second trimester. Evidence enough to shatter illusions. The hush amplified as Janine placed the envelope on a nearby table with deliberate calm. "You want to discuss overshadowing causes?" she said quietly, turning to Gabriella. "These speak for themselves." Gasps rippled among the onlookers who dared to glance at the photographs. Anthony's face twisted with alarm. "Janine, stop," he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper, but laced with desperation. "We can fix this." Just, his words trailed off. Janine's anger flared. "Fix this? Do you have any idea how much you've already broken? You lied to me. You lied to our families. And you thought you'd parade your mistress here without consequences?" Camera flashes ignited like small bursts of lightning, capturing the tears forming at Janine's eyes and the tension tightening Gabriella's features. Another hush fell, more somber this time, as those who once revered Anthony caught a glimpse of the monstrous betrayal overshadowing all his philanthropic grandstanding. Janine's breath hitched, battling a wave of dizziness from the onslaught of emotions and the physical toll of pregnancy. She held her ground. "I came here tonight because our child deserves honesty, and I refuse to be invisible." That single statement shattered the final pretense of civility. Anthony cast a frantic look around, glimpses of shame and regret contorting his handsome features. Gabriella, lips pressed into a thin line, began to retreat from the immediate spotlight. The rooftop, previously alive with laughter and clinking glasses, now pulsed with the gravity of this revelation. In that charged moment, Janine recognized the precarious path ahead. She knew the confrontation had only begun. The night after the gala ended in a media frenzy, with tabloids gleefully plastering pictures of Janine's baby bump and Gabriella's icy stare across their front pages. Anthony was besieged by reporters demanding a statement, employees clamoring for clarification, and investors nervous about how the scandal might ripple across the Astor conglomerate. Janine, meanwhile, locked herself in her private suite back at the mansion. She sat on the edge of a plush chaise, head in her hands, reeling from the public spectacle she had just unleashed. Though she knew it was necessary to expose Anthony, the conflict left her feeling raw and hollow. Sleep eluded her. Images of Gabriella's smirk and Anthony's panicked eyes replayed in a loop. At dawn, she finally emerged to find the mansion's staff moving with guarded politeness. Some offered sympathetic glances, others scuttled away, uncomfortable with the tension that had transformed their once stately domain into a silent battlefield. Janine could hardly blame them. She felt like an outsider herself, a stranger in the very home she had helped decorate with carefully chosen art and antiques. While sipping tea in the breakfast room, she scrolled through endless social media posts dissecting the fiasco. The world had opinions on everything: her pregnancy, Anthony's betrayal, the future of the Astor empire. A swirl of anger and pity dominated the public discourse, with most strangers siding with Janine as the wronged woman. But not everyone sympathized. Pockets of the internet thrived on conspiracy theories, claiming Janine had orchestrated the drama for publicity. The weight of public scrutiny grew heavier by the minute. Around mid-morning, Anthony's text messages started appearing. "We need to talk, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. Don't shut me out. Let's fix this." Janine read them all, her chest tightening with hurt and an odd flicker of concern. For better or worse, he was the father of her unborn child. She couldn't pretend he didn't exist, no matter how deep the betrayal ran. Eventually, she typed out a curt response: "We'll speak at home tonight." Several hours later, Anthony returned, his shoulders slumped, tie askew, carrying the exhaustion of a man whose carefully stacked empire threatened to crumble. They met in a dimly lit sitting room lined with ancestral portraits, the suffocating presence of Astor family history bearing down on them. Anthony started, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. There's no excuse for what I did. You have to believe that, do I?" Janine interrupted. "Gabriella was no secret to you, Anthony. You didn't just stumble into this. You chose it." He lowered himself onto a velvet armchair, burying his face in his hands. For a moment, Janine glimpsed not the business titan revered by society, but a flawed man crumbling under the weight of his lies. She wasn't sure if it was genuine remorse or fear for his own reputation. "Gabriella came into the picture while we were expanding our business interests in Europe," he confessed. "The Morettis are a powerful family, and she was crucial to bridging certain deals. One night, after too many drinks, things got personal. I should have stopped there." He looked up, eyes glistening, but I didn't. Janine's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Was any of this real, or was it purely corporate? He swallowed. It was complicated. At times, it felt real. Other times, it was more about alliances, future expansions. My father's legacy demands constant growth. I let that overshadow my marriage. Maybe I even convinced myself that I could keep the world separate. Silence. The faint tick of a grandfather clock filled the space between them. Janine wrestled with disgust, sorrow, and an inexplicable sense of relief at finally hearing a fragment of truth. "You realize I can't just forgive you," she whispered, pressing a trembling hand against her belly. Anthony's gaze flicked to her stomach, shame filling his expression. "I know, but I want to make this right somehow. For you, for the baby, I'll step away from Gabriella. I'll end the deal if I must," she exhaled, teeth clenched in frustration. "Do what you need to do," she said. "I'll be staying here for the time being, but don't expect me to play happy family while you figure out your next move." He nodded, tears threatening but not falling. Fair enough. Janine turned and left, each step echoing a singular truth. No matter how many tears were shed or promises offered, the gulf between them might be too wide to bridge. In the wake of Janine's public reveal, the Astor empire showed hairline cracks that spread rapidly. Some board members whispered about the potential meltdown of Anthony's public image, worried that clients would flee if the drama cast doubt on his leadership. Meanwhile, Gabriella issued statements framed as philanthropic updates, sidestepping direct accusations while subtly dismissing Janine as an emotional spouse facing personal turmoil. Feeling isolated, Janine found an unlikely ally in Harriet Townsend, a stern, silver-haired woman who had served as a close advisor to Anthony's late father. Though Harriet was known for her no-nonsense approach, Janine could sense a thread of compassion behind the older woman's stoic facade. One afternoon, Harriet invited Janine for tea in a quiet parlor at the mansion. "I've known Anthony since he was a boy," Harriet began, offering Janine a porcelain cup. "He's made a grave mistake, but I suspect there's more to Gabriella's involvement. The Moretti family's approach to business is aggressive, to say the least." Janine stirred sugar into her tea. "So I've heard, but I'm not certain how that helps me." Harriet folded her hands. "Perhaps we should find out if Gabriella's role was purely emotional, or if the Morettis intended to bind themselves to the Astors in a more permanent way. If the latter, they might have pressured Anthony, using seduction as leverage. He wouldn't be the first man to fall for that ploy." Janine felt a shiver of indignation. Anthony still made his choice. True, but if there's a deeper scheme, it could threaten not only your marriage, but your child's financial security. "I suspect the Morettis want to merge reputations as well as corporations. If Gabriella managed to marry Anthony, that would be the ultimate power play for both families." The notion took Janine's breath away. "You really think they're pushing for that?" Harriet nodded grimly. "They're thorough. If you step aside quietly, they'll have free rein. And if you fight them, they'll likely ramp up their efforts to discredit you. Janine pressed a hand to her belly, protective instincts stirring. So how do I stop them? Information, Harriet said simply. Shine light on any secret deals or unethical arrangements. If Gabriella's attempts to sway Anthony included questionable tactics, exposing it can turn public sentiment against her. And as for the Astor board, they won't stand behind a deal that reaps scandal upon scandal. Janine inhaled sharply. The last few weeks had been spent in an endless cycle of grief and anger, but Harriet's words gave her a sense of purpose. Where do I start? Harriet took a measured sip of tea. Check Anthony's private files. Speak to staffers who've traveled with him. Look for anything unusual payments, hush-hush meetings, correspondences. If you uncover evidence that the Morettis played dirty, you can leverage it to protect your child's future. Janine nodded, her resolve firming. For the first time, she felt less like a powerless wife and more like a mother lion, ready to defend her cub. The betrayal that had nearly undone her now fueled her fight. She would not cower in the face of the Moretti name or Anthony's manipulations. If the game was about power, then Janine would play, guided by truth rather than greed. The mansion's study was a sanctum typically guarded by Anthony's personal staff, but late one evening, Janine found it unoccupied. She crept in, heart hammering, her phone's flashlight guiding her through rows of leather-bound books and framed photographs depicting Astor patriarchs from generations past. On the desk lay files labeled with cryptic references: Monaco Venture, Paris Expansion, Moretti Collaboration. Sorting through them, Janine discovered detailed outlines of proposed deals with the Moretti brand, weaving hospitality expansions with high-fashion cross-promotions. Some of it seemed routine, a synergy of business empires. But the devil lay in the small footnotes discussing intangible personal agreements and non-disclosure addenda. The language was vague, yet it implied arrangements beyond standard corporate practice. 2 pages in particular made her pause. The first was a letter bearing the Moretti seal, referencing a future alliance beneficial to both families. The second contained schedules of Anthony's alleged business dinners, which coincided suspiciously with nights he'd claimed to be at separate locations. An uneasy chill coursed through Janine. She could envision a scenario in which Gabriella dangled not just herself, but also exclusive Moretti deals pressuring Anthony to comply. Maybe at first he resisted, or maybe he didn't. Either way, it confirmed Harriet's suspicion. Gabriella's presence went far beyond an affair. Janine snapped photos of the suspicious pages on her phone before carefully placing everything back. She returned to her suite, adrenaline still surging. A swirl of questions filled her mind. Would the Astor board recoil if they saw proof of deals negotiated through personal relationships? Would Anthony's claims of wanting to fix his marriage mean anything if such documents came to light? Uncertain, she opened her laptop and combed through business news archives. She discovered a pattern in every major expansion Moretti undertook. Rumors abounded of strategic seductions, unscrupulous offers, and under-the-table transactions. Lawsuits were often hushed with large settlements. There was no conclusive proof, but the pattern painted an ugly picture of how the Morettis played on an international stage. Janine breathed a weary sigh. She recalled Harriet's words, "Information is power." From these documents, she held seeds of power that might protect her child. But was she truly ready to wage war against an entire clan, especially while grappling with her own heartbreak? Determination won out over fear. Yes, she thought grimly. For the baby's sake, she had no choice but to see this through. Within days of the gala scandal, Gabriella launched an aggressive PR campaign, painting Janine as an unstable, jealous wife. Social media buzzed with planted rumors. Janine had invented the affair for attention, or she was too wrapped up in her own fashion brand to support Anthony. Some accounts even suggested the baby might not be Anthony's, although such claims were quickly dismissed by more reputable sources. For Janine, each new wave of gossip felt like a fresh stab. She woke daily to phone alerts, tabloids regurgitating lies, talk shows featuring body language experts claiming Gabriella's posture at the gala indicated innocence while Janine's indicated hostility. She forced herself not to respond to each jab. Harriet warned her that a reactive approach would play into Gabriella's hands. Meanwhile, a rumor that Janine was considering divorce circulated among the press. She had not publicly confirmed such plans, but it wasn't far from the truth. She weighed the option daily, especially on nights when Anthony didn't return, leaving her to face the swirling madness alone. If she filed for divorce, she could stake a claim to her rightful portion of the Astor assets and secure her child's inheritance, free from Anthony's or Gabriella's manipulations. And yet, something held her back. Partly, it was the memory of the man she once adored, the one who seemed so genuine in the early years. Another part was fear of an ugly legal battle in the public eye, fear that the stress of prolonged conflict might harm her unborn baby. If there was any path to handle this quietly while safeguarding her future, she wanted to find it. Harriet's idea of exposing Gabriella's corrupt methods provided an alternative path. If the Moretti alliance was discredited, maybe the board would recoil, forcing Anthony to genuinely distance himself. But that plan depended on timing, and Harriet insisted they only had one shot to make the truth stick. Harriet, adopting the role of a quiet strategist, invited Janine to meet a veteran journalist, Simone DaCosta, who specialized in uncovering corporate malfeasance. They convened in a discreet corner of a bustling Manhattan cafe where eavesdroppers would be drowned out by the hum of conversation and clinking dishes. Janine, nerves taut, handed over copies of documents she had gathered. She explained how certain notations hinted at unscrupulous activity by Gabriella and her father, Dario Moretti. Simone examined the pages, her eyes narrowing at the subtle clues. "If what you say is accurate," she said, "then the Morettis have built a pipeline of backdoor deals under the guise of legitimate partnerships. That's headline material." Janine's stomach twisted. "It goes beyond headlines. I want to protect my child. And frankly, myself, I'm not an expert in corporate espionage or scandal. I just know something is very wrong." Simone nodded, her tone sympathetic. "I'm cautious about revealing my sources. If I decide to publish, I'll confirm details independently. Just be prepared. If we go public, you'll face an even fiercer backlash from Gabriella." "I understand," Janine said quietly, "but I won't hide anymore." After the meeting, Janine stepped onto the sidewalk, the city's bustle pressing in around her. In her chest, an uneasy hope bloomed. Perhaps a thorough investigation could give her some control over a situation where she'd felt powerless for too long. Unrest within the Astor board grew daily. Investors fretted about the negative press overshadowing the conglomerate's projects. A significant faction urged Anthony to step aside from negotiations involving the Moretti partnership until his personal life stabilized. Others contended that the partnership was too lucrative to lose. Meetings devolved into shouting matches over the risk of scandal, with directors pointing to a slump in the company's stock price. Janine, typically not present in these board gatherings, learned of the tension through Harriet. On a brisk afternoon, Harriet intercepted her in the mansion's foyer, a look of urgency in her eyes. "You need to attend tomorrow's special session," she said. "They'll be voting on whether to finalize a key phase of the Moretti deal or scrap it entirely." "But I'm not on the board," Janine replied. Harriet smiled thinly. "As Anthony's wife, you hold equity in the company enough to request an invitation. Besides, your name is central to the scandal that's threatening this deal. They can't simply pretend you don't exist." And so, the following day, Janine stepped into a gleaming conference room on the top floor of Astor Tower. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled below, a testament to the empire Roger Astor had built. Around a mahogany table sat a dozen directors, their faces ranging from curious to guarded. Anthony occupied a seat near the head, flanked by attorneys on one side. Gabriella, flanked by her father and a few Moretti advisors, sat on the other side. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. Chairman Carlton Reeves, a stately figure with silver-rimmed glasses, initiated the discussion. We're here to address the swirling controversies surrounding Astor's proposed collaboration with the Moretti family. Given recent public scrutiny, this board must decide if continuing negotiations remains in our best interest. Gabriella spoke first, radiating confidence. Anthony and I have worked tirelessly to craft a partnership that elevates both our brands globally. Yes, there have been personal distractions, but business should not be derailed by private drama. The Moretti Group stands firm in our desire to proceed. Her eyes flicked dismissively toward Janine. Before Janine could respond, Anthony cleared his throat. I admit there have been challenges. My personal life became too entangled with professional dealings, which I regret. But from a strictly financial perspective, the synergy is still promising. Murmurs rippled through the board. A woman named Liliana Cortez, Director of International Operations, turned to Janine. Mrs. Astor, do you have any input? Janine's pulse hammered, but she steadied herself. I do. I've seen documents suggesting that Moretti's methods are not entirely transparent or ethical. There are potential legal landmines lurking within these expansions, which could severely damage Astor's reputation if fully exposed. Dario Moretti bristled. Baseless allegations, he growled. You speak as if you are an expert in corporate law. I'm no expert, Janine conceded, mustering calm. But I've shared my findings with journalists who are. Should proof emerge of unethical conduct, the fallout could cost Astor far more than this deal is worth. A hush settled. Anthony seemed genuinely torn. Liliana and several other directors exchanged uneasy glances, aware that the media already held a bright spotlight on the Astor name. The meeting reached a tense standstill until Chairman Reeves declared, "We'll postpone a final vote until we can verify these concerns. Next item." But just then, a junior assistant burst in, apologizing profusely for the interruption. She whispered something to Reeves, who frowned and turned on a large screen at the head of the table. A breaking news segment flickered into view. Simone DaCosta appeared, reporting on newly revealed documents linking Moretti expansions to corruption investigations in multiple European markets. Though no direct allegations were leveled at Anthony, the segment implied that any partner in these expansions risked severe reputational damage. Gabriella paled. Dario Moretti's face turned scarlet with rage, and around the table the mood shifted abruptly. Someone muttered, "We can't continue this, too great a liability." Another director nodded, "We'll be crucified by the press if we push ahead." Janine's heart pounded as she realized the strategic leak had arrived earlier than she anticipated. She caught Harriet's eye and received a subtle nod. It had begun. The next days unfolded like a series of controlled detonations. The Astor board, now facing public suspicion, suspended negotiations with Moretti. Lawyers on both sides scrambled to contain the fallout. Gabriella's father, Dario, threatened to sue Astor for defamation, claiming the rumors about corruption were false. Yet with Simone DaCosta's revelations making global headlines, many critics wondered if the Moretti empire had indeed been playing a high-stakes game of bribery and political manipulation. Anthony, buffeted by scandal on every side, locked himself in his office for hours, possibly plotting an exit strategy. Janine rarely saw him except in passing, when he looked so haggard she almost felt pity. Almost. She reminded herself of the nights he lied and the hurt he inflicted. Still, for the sake of her unborn child, she hoped he'd navigate out of this crisis without sinking them all. Public opinion, once starstruck by Anthony Astor's philanthropic persona, began to shift. Tabloids now depicted him as a man whose empire was built on shaky moral ground, overshadowed by a mistress at the center of ethically dubious deals. Gabriella offered interviews, painting herself as an ambitious professional who only stumbled into a complicated romance, but the deflection rang hollow in the face of mounting evidence that Moretti expansions had involved payoffs to local officials in various countries. Even if those allegations proved untrue, the swirling smoke alone was enough to strangle the partnership. For Janine, each day was a mixture of relief at seeing the Moretti threat weakening and anxiety over what lay ahead. She had begun to consider life on her own, raising the baby in a more stable environment. She contacted a divorce attorney who recommended a discreet approach, delaying an official filing until the scandal's dust settled, as the child's future inheritance could become a bargaining chip if Anthony's empire broke apart. In the midst of this chaos, Harriet continued to guide Janine with measured advice: hold on to any further evidence, remain composed in public, and refuse to respond to Gabriella's vitriol with anything but dignity. Janine followed that counsel meticulously, even as she waded through heartbreak. She recognized that the crisis enveloping the Astor name had evolved beyond a mere affair. It became a moral reckoning over how far the pursuit of wealth could overshadow integrity. After weeks of stony silence between them, Anthony and Janine finally confronted each other on a drizzly afternoon in the mansion's sunroom. Grey light filtered through the windows, illuminating the tension etched into Anthony's face. The reflection of raindrops sliding down the glass seemed fitting for their mood, melancholic and unsettled. He spoke first, breaking the hush. "The board wants me to temporarily step down as CEO." Janine folded her arms around the swell of her belly. "I'm not surprised." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, I imagine not. I've jeopardized everything." A fleeting sorrow crossed his features. "I know I deserve the fallout, but it kills me that I might drag you and our child down with me." Janine leaned against a nearby table, exhaustion evident in her stance. "I'm handling it. I have my own lawyers, my own strategies. But none of this needed to happen." The unspoken words, "if you hadn't betrayed me," clung to the air. Anthony nodded, eyes glistening with regret. "I understand if you want a divorce," he said quietly. "My lawyers are prepared for that scenario, but I want you to know something. I never planned to replace you with Gabriella." It was never about love for her. It was ambition twisted into something sordid, and I was too blind or too arrogant to stop it. Emotions churned in Janine's chest, but she refused to let tears surface. She'd shed enough already. "I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. I'm angry that you gave her such power. I'm furious you lied while I carried our child. But a small part of me is relieved that maybe it wasn't love, because it hurts less that way." Anthony stared at the floor. "I wish I could go back and fix it. Even if we can't be husband and wife the way we used to, maybe we can find a way to coexist, especially once the baby is here." Janine said nothing, the silence speaking volumes of her uncertainty. After a long moment, she turned to leave. Pausing at the threshold, she murmured without looking back, "If you truly want to protect us, step away from the Morettis entirely. Show some backbone." He didn't reply, and the steady patter of rain filled the emptiness behind her. No matter how vigorously Gabriella tried to salvage the Moretti name, new leaks continually surfaced, each one revealing corners of the family's business that teetered on the edge of legality. International journalists unearthed suspicious mergers and sudden policy shifts in countries where Moretti had expanded, fueling speculation that bribes had greased those deals. In an effort to shift blame, Gabriella demanded a meeting with Anthony at a private dining club known for its confidentiality. Paparazzi, however, caught them arriving separately. By morning, headlines screamed, "Anthony and Gabriella, secret talks amidst corporate collapse." From these images, Janine gleaned that Gabriella hadn't simply vanished into oblivion. She was still a threat, still lingering. Days later, Anthony, tight-lipped and tense, admitted that Gabriella had threatened to publicly claim Astor was complicit in Moretti's questionable operations, turning him into a scapegoat if he didn't push the board to sign the partnership agreement. She also floated the idea of quietly continuing their affair, an attempt to maintain personal leverage in a failing arrangement. It all reeked of desperation. This time, Anthony rebuffed her demands outright. "We're done," he told her, according to a text message he showed Janine. "I'm severing ties both personally and professionally." Gabriella's response was chillingly direct. "You'll regret this." For Janine, that final vow from Gabriella underlined the cunning power the woman still wielded. But she also felt a tenuous sense of vindication. Perhaps Anthony had finally recognized how dangerously he had toyed with fate. Around her 7th month of pregnancy, Janine woke one night to sharp discomfort in her abdomen. Panic surged. The stress of constant scandal made her fear complications might arise. She called out, and staff quickly fetched Anthony from his separate suite. He rushed in, eyes wide with concern, and helped her to the car. They sped to the hospital under flashing city lights. In the maternity ward, the doctor's initial exam revealed early contractions triggered by anxiety and exhaustion. After administering medication to stabilize her condition, the medical team insisted she remain under observation. Anthony stayed by her side, the tension between them replaced by a fleeting tenderness. For the first time in months, Janine allowed herself to lean on him, tears escaping her carefully constructed composure. The next morning, the doctor told them the baby was stable. Janine needed rest, minimal stress, and an environment free from emotional turmoil, a tall order given the scandal raging outside. Yet for a few precious hours in the hospital, Janine and Anthony found a fragile truce. He held her hand, apologized again for everything, and she nodded wordlessly, too weary to fight. "This child is everything," she whispered, brushing a hand over her belly where the baby kicked in response. "I have to be strong, but I feel so broken." Anthony bowed his head, voice hoarse with regret. "I'll do better, I promise." Janine couldn't hide her skepticism, but she accepted his presence for now, if only to gather the reserves of strength she needed to bring their baby safely into the world. Following her hospital scare, Janine moved into a quieter wing of the mansion, aided by a small staff and Harriet's watchful eye. While Harriet handled the day-to-day press queries, Janine avoided social media and tabloids entirely, focusing on her health. News of Astor's stalled partnership with Moretti escalated, with major financial outlets predicting the deal was beyond repair. Meanwhile, Simone DaCosta's continued reporting exposed new layers of Moretti's alleged misconduct, intensifying the pressure on Gabriella. Some claimed her father was prepared to disown her for pushing deals that backfired catastrophically. In a final blaze of defiance, Gabriella held a press conference, staging herself as a victim of media sensationalism. Cameras captured her tearful speech about falling in love with the wrong man and being used by manipulative powers in the Astor board. But the public had already grown suspicious of her theatrics. Outlets covering her statement ended up contrasting her tearful claims with a litany of leaked documents linking Moretti to questionable deals. The more she tried to spin the narrative, the faster her credibility withered. Not long after, the Moretti legal team announced they were withdrawing from any negotiations with Astor, citing a toxic environment. The severance was swift and absolute. Anthony, facing the board's wrath, relinquished his CEO position temporarily, handing the reins to Carlton Reeves. While the press read this as a soft ouster, inside sources suggested it was the only way to stabilize the company. On paper, Anthony remained a major shareholder, but his day-to-day authority vanished. Gabriella left Manhattan soon after, whisked away in a flurry of paparazzi snaps, capturing her hurried exit. The ephemeral romance and grand alliance she dreamed of had turned to dust. For Janine, it marked a moment of relief, but not necessarily joy. The affair had shattered her marriage. In many ways, the damage was irreparable. Yet she could sense the toxic storm clearing, replaced by a hushed calm. Despite the hospital scare, Janine carried her baby to term. On a crisp autumn night, she felt her contractions begin in earnest. This time, Anthony was by her side from the start, driving her to the hospital and holding her hand through each wave of pain. The staff recognized the notorious couple from the headlines, but in the delivery room, gossip gave way to human compassion. After hours of labor, Janine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment the newborn's cries pierced the air, she felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude. Tears slipped down her face, and she gently cradled the tiny life in her arms. Anthony stood nearby, his own eyes shining with amazement, tentatively reaching out to touch the baby's soft cheek. A nurse asked what name they'd chosen, and Janine glanced at Anthony. He nodded, voice soft. "We decided on Lorenzo," he said, pressing a trembling kiss to the baby's forehead. The hush that followed was charged with love, sorrow, and hesitant hope all at once. In that surreal instant, the scandal, the heartbreak, the betrayals, they all receded into the background as this new life took center stage. But real life rarely ends with the arrival of a child. Discharge papers came, along with new responsibilities and a mountain of unresolved questions about the future. Janine found herself in a reflective lull, caring for Lorenzo in the stillness of the nursery she'd designed months earlier, while Anthony stayed in a guest suite. Weeks passed in a swirl of sleepless nights and careful feedings. Janine proved to be a doting mother, determined to give her son as much stability as possible. Anthony tiptoed around her, unsure how to navigate fatherhood without overstepping. The scandal's immediate flames died down, replaced by the next tabloid obsession, but the embers still glowed beneath the surface. On an evening when Lorenzo finally dozed off, Janine found Anthony in the mansion's library, flipping through an old photo album of his father's achievements. She hesitated at the threshold, recalling happier times when they'd dreamed of traveling the world together. Those dreams now felt like remnants of another life. He noticed her and closed the album. "How's Lorenzo?" "Sleeping, thankfully," she said, joining him. An uneasy silence spread. Anthony inhaled, summoning courage. "The lawyers say if we choose an amicable separation, we can finalize it quietly. But if you want to try counseling," her heart twisted. She had toyed with the idea of walking away for good, forging a new life where she wasn't haunted by his betrayal. And yet, as she looked at him, she wondered if redemption was possible. "I don't know," she admitted. "We can start with therapy, maybe, but I'm not promising any outcome." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes." His words hung in the air, an olive branch, but also a reminder that trust once broken is never easily mended. Janine glanced at the baby monitor, hearing Lorenzo's soft coo. She realized her future decisions would resonate beyond herself, shaping her son's upbringing. Did she want him to grow up estranged from his father, or did she believe a fragile peace could bloom into something more? No neat answer formed in her mind. Perhaps that was the reality of real life, messy, uncertain, and yet brimming with the potential for both heartbreak and healing. In the end, Janine recognized that no matter the path she chose, reconciliation or final parting, her strength had been tested and proven. She had stood against a juggernaut of betrayal, public scandal, and corporate greed. She had safeguarded her child. She had not crumbled. And that realization lit a small flame of hope in her chest, enough to guide her through whatever came next. Drama may flare, secrets might shatter reputations, but Janine's saga shows that courage and resilience can withstand the fiercest betrayal. She didn't shy away from unveiling the truth. She fought for her dignity while safeguarding her unborn child. Though the road ahead remains uncertain, Janine's unwavering spirit proves that broken hearts can still choose the path of integrity and self-worth. Her tale reminds us that real life doesn't always offer fairy tale endings, yet it does grant second chances, sometimes to rebuild, sometimes to walk away on our own terms. If this story of scandal, heartbreak, and a mother's fierce resolve stirred your emotions, take a moment to hit that like button, share it with friends who love drama and redemption arcs, and subscribe for more tales that tackle life's toughest twists. Your support ensures we can keep bringing you stories that resonate and inspire. Stay tuned for what's next.